Today on Comicstorian, we're going to continue the journey of discovering how Miguel O'Hara became the superhero known as Spider-Man 2099 and learned the lessons of what it takes to be Spider-Man. This is Comicstorian, where I take some of your favorite trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites. We cut out a lot of the fluff, the additional plot line, and we cut it down to just tell you exactly what is going on. The point of this is to bring you a synopsis of the overall storyline so that you know what is going on in your favorite comic books, and you're able to go buy this comic book for more context and more art, or you can get the next one in the series and still know what is happening. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Today we're going to be continuing our coverage of Spider-Man 2099. Now, when we last left off, Miguel O'Hara had been granted the abilities of Spider-Man and was beginning to get used to being the Spider-Man of the year 2099. But in his last adventure, he discovered a brand new villain known as Mutagen, who had the ability to adapt his DNA to counter anything Spider-Man could throw at him. On top of that, Mutagen decided that he was going to kill anybody who was having a genetic defect. We're also still in the spin-off series, 2099 Unlimited, and not in the mainline book again. I'll tell you when we go back to that and continue the main storyline. Now, let's pick up with 2099 Unlimited number 2. Spider-Man leaped over the heads of the thugs, allowing them to punch each other in the face as he protects the woman. "How does he move so fast?" the thugs shout, but Spider-Man twirls, kicking another goon in the face. One goon remains holding an energy blade, ordering Spidey to stay back, but a quick burst of his webbing spinnerets turns him into a goopy package waiting for the public eye officers. He turns back to the woman, asking her to make sure that the officers arrest the thugs, and she smiles at him, offering to get to know him just a little bit better. But Spider-Man shakes his head. "Time for me to get out of here," he tells her as he leaps into the air. "Wait! Who are you?" she shouts, looking over his shoulder as he swings away. "Just a regular guy in really funny clothing," he calls to her. Elsewhere in the city, Damian and Carmen lean over their console and verify that their work is finally done. Carmen putting out her cigarette, enthusiastic that they are finally finishing the work on the first working software that can be downloaded straight into someone's brain through sense of sight. "It's untested, Carmen. Let us not forget scientific principles in our haste to win fame and fortune," Damian reminds her. And he turns away from her, looking out their lab window, murmuring about how they still need a test subject before they can even think about bringing this to someone like Alchemax. "It'll only work on the relatively close-minded," Carmen reminds him as she turns back to her computer. "Speaking of close-minded, look who's working late at Technic. It's Mitchell," Damian says as he points across to the nearby building. Carmen smiles. "You never did forgive him for getting you fired. It'd be funny if we tried it on him. That'd settle the score," she muses, but Damian nods, turning back to his computer, ignoring Carmen's complaints as he begins to work on the program. And with that, he sends the virus across the vidphone. In his office, Mitchell picks up the line, his voice dropping off as his face goes slack and he drops the phone, rushing headfirst into his window, slamming his head against it again and again. Damian watches from across the way, smiling, as Carmen looks in shock. And finally, Mitchell falls to the ground, dead from blunt force trauma. Damian looks at Carmen, laughing, telling her that their work is a success. But what they don't know is that Alchemax has their lab bugged. An operator has already called his supervisor, explaining that the pair have already tested their work and killed someone in a competing lab. The supervisor nods, ordering them to put together a raider team to send over to the lab. And in the lab, Carmen is getting worried as Damian just keeps jumping up and down and celebrating. "We're gonna rake it in," he tells her with a smile as he lights up another cigarette. But he finally agrees that they must be cautious and heads to his own lab to gather up his data. "We should get out of here as soon as possible. We can discuss our split later," he tells her as he exits the room. But Carmen doesn't trust Damian. She begins to work on the program again, bringing out the profile of Miguel O'Hara. Miguel, I meant to call you this week. I need someone to do my dirty work for me. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you're it," she whispers as she types in the code and sends out the message. She turns away from the computer. Damian is behind her, slamming her face with an old replica of the Statue of Liberty. He hits her again and again until she finally lays on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Meanwhile, Miguel has finally returned home after the incident with Mutagen, slipping through some vents before dropping into his apartment and removing his mask. "Evening, Lila. Is there any milk left?" he asks his hollow assistant as she appears. "Yes, about half a liter," she says as she points to the fridge. He walks over for a drink as she gives him his messages. "You have a message from Dr. Carmen Lynch. It must have come through garbled. I can't make any sense of it." Miguel nods as he drinks his milk and tells her to play it. The noise fills the room, and suddenly Miguel drops his milk, his face going slack. He now has one thought in his head: kill Damien. Lila shows her concern as Miguel pulls on his mask and heads into the vents. But he ignores her questions as he heads out of the apartment once again, leaping into the night air. Meanwhile, the Alchemex Raider team is heading towards the target, going quickly over the briefing on their target. At his office, Damien doesn't bother to try and clean up his mess, instead heading for the software for the program, but the window shatters behind him as Spider-Man leaps through it. Good lord! They sent a corporate raider after me! Damien shouts as he tries to flee, but Spider-Man quickly follows behind him. But Miguel can start to feel his body again. His thoughts are coming through muddled, but he still can't control his body. No, please! Damien pleads as Spider-Man reaches out, his talons extending as he reaches for Damien's face. What am I doing? Miguel thinks to himself, but the room is suddenly filled with blaster fire and Spider-Man leaps away. The Raiders enter the lab, ordering Damien to put his hands up, but Spider-Man comes down from the ceiling, surprising the other Raiders and forcing them to open fire. Can't stop. It's like I'm on autopilot. No access to my muscles, reflexes. What has Carmen done to me? Holy shock, it's Spider-Man! The Raiders shout as the wall crawler leaps amongst them. He kicks out, knocking the leader of the group down as he jumps away. The Raiders keep trying to tag him, but he jumps out of the way of their blows and blaster fire. He dodges past their weapons fire and kicks the leader in the face again, finally jumping down and knocking them both out. But Miguel isn't in control of himself, turning his gaze towards where Damien must have run. He follows him back to the lab, finding Damien trying to reconnect the system so that he can shut down the virus. No, I won't be a killer! Miguel shouts inside of his mind as he inches closer to the scientist, reaching with his talons. But Miguel continues to fight, trying to control his leg, and he finally manages, leaping across the lab, slamming into a piece of equipment. The current rips through his body, nearly killing him, but also resetting the program that has taken control of his brain. He struggles to his feet, finally shaking his head clear. Come on, the Raiders are coming. I've got to get you out of here, Spider-Man tells Damien, but the scientist isn't having it, raising the same statue that he used to kill Carmen. One more step and he begins to say as he swings the makeshift weapon at Spider-Man, but the hero catches the scientist's hand, stopping him. Miguel looks down at the body of his former friend, anger welling up inside of him. You kill. He begins, but he stops, and he backhands Damien across the room. He won't kill Damien, but Damien killed his friend, and he's not going to save him. Because as the Raiders burst into the room, they don't bother to look as one of them opens fire at Damien, the blast killing the scientist and destroying the computer with all of the data. Spider-Man moves fast, leaping out the shattered window and into the night air. Ooh, glad to have my mind back, he thinks to himself as he lands on a rooftop looking over his city. Goodbye, Carmen. I almost envy you. You're free now. Free of a world where everything's under control. Sometime later, Spider-Man leaps for the weapons wagon, trying to avoid the fire of the public eye hoverbike that is chasing the criminal. It's no fun being shot at by the public eye when you're trying to do a job for them. He thinks to himself with a sigh as he dodges more blaster fire. Reaching down, he grabs the van hatch, ripping it off with his super strength. What the shock? The criminals shout as Spider-Man leaps inside. Please, my virgin ears! Spider-Man shouts as he leaps among them, taking them out with a few well-placed kicks and punches. He reaches down, putting the battle wagon into hover mode, but the blaster fire still pings off the glass. Where's the communicator? He whispers, searching for the controls. A short time later, the public eye stops firing as the LT looks at the message from Spider-Man that informs him that he won't attack them if they stop firing. Cease fire! Cease fire! That's an order! She shouts to her men as Spider-Man leaps from the van and swings away. Yeah, I'm really late. He sighs as he swings onward. I'm going to kill him for being late, Anna thinks to herself as she sits in front of Miss Bennett of the Helix Corporation. The woman offers to start their tour without Miguel. We may just be an Alchemex subsidiary, but we do have things to do, she explains, wishing to show Anna a few of their projects before they get to the reason for Alchemex's visit. Luckily, just as they begin to walk away, Miguel comes charging through the door, shouting for them. Miguel O'Hara, right? Trouble getting through public transportation? And with that, Miguel is apologizing. You have no idea, he says with a smile, and she begins to lead them through the building, wishing to show them as many of the projects as she can as they go to tour the DNA medical scanner that Helix has been working on. Meanwhile, in his apartment downtown, the man known as Mutagen has finally hacked into the Helix's mainframe and found the location of what he's searching for, their portable DNA scanner. Convenient, right? This will be invaluable to my work. No more stealing hospital files. No more guesswork. I could use the scanner on the street. Make my decision right there. He thinks to himself with a smile, and he stands walking across the apartment, pulling on the mutagen costume, knowing that he must continue his work to purify the human race. Those with genetic defects must be killed, so the human gene pool may improve itself, he says to himself, pulling on the mutagen costume and leaping out the window, his body morphing to have skin flaps to allow him to glide through the air. Meanwhile, Miss Benet has led them down into one of Helix's sublevels. She leads them into one room and shows them a globe that traps ambient solar energy, producing amazing heat without any apparent power source. Great. Next time we'll bring marshmallows. Can you show me the DNA scanner now before we get sunburned? Miguel asks her. And moments later they are found standing in another lab while Benet explains that the DNA scanner will cut down the time spent on medical diagnosis in half. Suddenly her phone beeps and she answers it, annoyed as the security team tells her that there is an issue topside. Look, if you can hear me, I'm dealing with some very important people right now. Whatever the problem is, just handle it, she hisses, but the guard can't hear her anymore. He's lying on the ground, dead, mutagen standing over his body. I warned you people to leave me to my work. Why do you insist on interfering? I merely need to know where the DNA scanner is so that I can take it, he says to the bodies. He types away at one of the computers, finding it to be in one of the sublevels, but a guard comes up from behind him, opening fire. The blaster bolt just bounces off. That was not wise! I've already adapted to your blasters. You saw it earlier! Mutagen says to the guard as he turns around. He reaches out, quickly killing the man before stepping into the elevator. Probably better you don't pass your idiocy onto future generations, he says to the body as the door closes. Below, Benet is leading Miguel and Anna back to the elevators, but the sound of grinding metal meets them as they near the lab doors. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with this place today. If you'd excuse me, I will try to find out, she tells them, moving forward, but the lab doors suddenly explode inward, throwing her away. Another unnecessary death. At times, I feel the cost of my mission may be too high, Mutagen says as he steps through the door, with Miguel and Anna looking at the villain in shock, but he waves them away, offering to leave them and avoid any more bloodshed. But as Miguel grabs Anna's hand, he begins to lead her away, with Mutagen stopping them. He recognizes Anna from the hospital, knowing that she was there with her sick sister. A genetic disorder that you probably carry as well. He points his finger at her, and Miguel steps in front, trying to stop Mutagen without revealing that he is in fact Spider-Man, but the villain slaps him away. Miguel's shoes fly off his feet as he flips through the air, but he slams into the wall and his talons grip it, allowing him to stick. So much for secrecy, he whispers as Mutagen and Anna stare at him sticking to the wall in shock. He leaps forward, knowing that he needs to hit Mutagen hard and fast so that he can't adapt. His talons draw blood from the villain as he quickly leaps and slashes him, ripping off his own clothes to change into his costume beneath. Run, Anna! Run! He shouts as Mutagen stops taking the beating, grabbing his arm. Miguel twists, shooting webbing into his face, but Mutagen pauses, ripping it away. Do you really think that would help you? And Miguel merely shrugs to that. No, but it gave me some time to get into my pajamas. What do you think? He asks, but Mutagen hits him hard, knocking him away, turning as Anna tries to run, throwing rubble at her, knocking her out. You maniac! You hurt Anna! I'll kill you, you hear? You'll pay in blood! Miguel shouts as he pulls on his mask, launching himself at the monster. He slams him through another door, and the two find themselves in the cryogenics lab. It wasn't too bright. It's freezing in here. Miguel thinks to himself as he begins to shiver. The two begin to trade blows as Mutagen quickly adapts to the cold. Spider-Man flipping away, hitting the controls, trying to make it even colder. Big mistake. I like the cold! Mutagen snarls as he slams his fist into Spider-Man. He kicks him hard, sending him across the room. I've grown accustomed to it, while you're simply out to become extinct. He shouts, and he hits him again and again, and with each blow knocking Spider-Man back, Spider-Man realizes that they're near the Solar Globe lab. He pushes himself, slamming his fist and feet into Mutagen. He's grown accustomed to the cold, but can you take the heat? Spider-Man thinks to himself, uppercutting Mutagen hard, sending him into the solar orb. There's a massive explosion that rocks the entire lab, and Spider-Man moves quickly, grabbing Anna from under the rubble, rushing her towards the elevator door. He begins to leap up the shaft as the lab explodes behind him. Hold on, Anna! Next stop, Coop Hospital! He shouts, and in the destruction below, heavy claws begin to pull themselves out of the rubble. Finally! A deep voice growls. Later at the hospital, Anna can't remember anything from the attack, with the doctors thinking that it has something to do with her head injury. Miguel smiles as he sits with the sisters, knowing that his secret identity is safe. And with that, we've concluded the weird side stories for the 2099 stuff involving Spider-Man. Like I said in our previous video, basically they kind of like gave an epilogue to the Thorite stuff, and then they went into this weird side story stuff where it was Mutagen, and then that story of the guy that killed his partner, and then the other Mutagen story. But now we're going back to the normal Spider-Man 2099 story. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit like, and join us next week as we continue the coverage of Spider-Man 2099 from the 90s.